Our Father in heaven, creator of all things, we thank you for your love and your watch care. We ask now that you would guide us as we meet to do the business for the Cherokee Nation. We thank you especially for our families and our home, and especially the freedom we enjoy in our country. We ask now that you bless each one that's here this morning. We pray for your divine guidance. We pray that we might blend our talents together to cause great things for the Cherokee Nation. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Thank you.
Roll call.
Meredith Riley.
Here.
Phil England. Bill John Baker.
Here.
Jack Baker.
Here.
Harley Buzzard. Julia Coates.
Here.
Bradley Cobb.
Aye.
Joe Crittenden.
Here.
Jody Fishinghawk.
Here.
Janelle Fulbright.
Here.
Tom Garvin. Chuck Hoskin Jr. Tina Glory Jordan.
Present.
Curtis Snell. Chris Soap.
Here.
David Thornton. Kara Cowan Watts.
Just say your name.
Honey, we have a quorum. We have a quorum. Okay, Representative Special. Yes, Ms. Fisher.
Before we start, I want to know, what is the provision of swearing people in front of us that's coming to report about something?
Mr. Lawyer.
I didn't hear your question,
I want to know about swearing people in that come and report in front of us, so this will be on the record and we won't have to go back and debate what the provision is.
We've never had a provision of taking an oath before the Cherokee Nation Tribal Council. Now, there is a provision that we could subpoena individuals, and then in that case, an oath may be appropriate, but there's a specific law as to that, and that was passed probably back in 2000, 2001. It's just deemed acceptable and expected that any statement that is made before this body is truthful and to the best of that individual's knowledge. But we've never adopted a rule to swear in or take an oath.
Okay, here's my question. I know we've been reported on this landfill before, it's been down in minutes, and stuff has been told to us that was not the truth. So how do I deal with that today, so I'll know?
If there is stuff that is not, that is false, I mean, you would, and that person is an employee of the Cherokee Nation, you would have the probably the expectation to report that to their supervisor, and make it a point with them. We have no employment control. We don't hire and fire anybody.
Okay.
Okay, but that's the way I would handle it.
Ms. Cowan Watts, and this is.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, I don't think that this forum, as it's constructed as a rules special committee meeting, would be, under the powers of this body, would be the place for that. It would be the powers under the Constitution of this legislative body to call a hearing, and that would be at that point where there would be an kind of investigative hearing, but that's not what today's meeting would be under, but it would be under that other format.
Yes, and then there's a specific law on that if we want to conduct such a hearing of that. This is just a regular special rules meeting that is brought for informational purposes.
Ms. Glory Jordan.
So Todd, if I understand you right, what you're saying is that we could set up such a hearing format and subpoena various people where they would then be, we could administer an oath, and they would be under the oath, under that particular oath, they would be compelled to tell the truth or face criminal sanctions.
Yes, there is, and I'll be happy to give you that act. If my memory serves me correctly, it was passed somewhere in either 2000 or 2001. The act was vetoed by the chief, and then that veto was overridden. So it is good law. And if we want to go through that procedure, we'd have to follow that statute.
Would you provide us, all of us, with that?
I most certainly will.
That particular act.
Okay.
Ms. Fisher. Okay, the purpose of this meeting is for a presentation by CNB on the transfer of Cherokee Nation waste management. Todd, before we get started, wish you would speak to the issue of privileged and confidential information. I think perhaps you and Diane have discussed that.
Yes, Diane's not here yet. Before you is a series of memorandums that were prepared for Cherokee Nation businesses. It is information that is very important to your consideration of the action here. I had already thought that these memorandums had been disseminated to you, but they have not. I do recommend that, I stated that they should be disseminated to you. They are attorney-client privileged. I would request that they not be sequestered from you, that you take them with you and study them, because they all contain information that is very important, and that at some time in the future you will need to make a decision on this matter. But be mindful that I would consider these memorandums confidential, even though it wasn't prepared specifically for the Cherokee Nation government, but Cherokee Nation businesses.
I just noticed in a quick review of all the documents that we've been given this morning and late last night, that they're all directed towards, or for the most part, except one, is directed towards CMB. Is there any reason why we have not requested our own legal opinion through our tribal council?
I would be happy to do that research. What I believe that this purpose for today is to hear information from CNB and also possibly from the Attorney General. And you as an independent body, branch of the government, can request your own legal opinion on this matter, be that from me or be it from an environmental specialist. However, we're and I've made the statement before, we're early in this process, in my opinion, that although there is a time schedule, I don't think that time schedule is today, to consider all ramifications on this, and not only just leave it up to attorneys' opinions, but also conduct your own due diligence in this matter, and I will help assist in any way that I can in that matter.
And Diane is here also. Ms. Attorney General, we're speaking to the privileged and confidential nature of this information. Tom has given us his opinion, and we appreciate yours.
We asked for, the law firm of Paul Estell had done, and I think some of you have previously seen their opinion regarding liability from the perspective of the businesses, Cherokee Nation Waste Management under CNB. I spoke to Mr. Huffman and asked if they would reformat that and direct it towards Cherokee Nation, the government, and they've done that, and we've provided it for you. I would treat it as any other attorney-client document. Certainly it's for your information and consideration, but not for public dissemination.
Which one of these, Diane, is directed towards Cherokee Nation as a government?
The August 3rd memorandum?
Well, I see it's directed to Bob Huffman, Jim Carrington, Cherokee Nation businesses, and Diane Hammonds.
The content of that memorandum deals with board liability and liability of government. So it's not necessarily direct. I mean, the content of it discuss those issues.
Well, I make a motion that we get our own legal opinion through Todd's office, and I would ask that Todd hire someone that is an expert in this area to assist him in giving him that formal opinion to this body, which is who he works for. I want an opinion from our attorney in conjunction with experts that he hires, and that it be directed to this body, not to Bob Huffman, Jim Carrington, Cherokee Nation businesses, or Diane Hammonds. I want it directed to this body, so that if later on we figure out that the advice we've been given is not the advice we should have been given, we can look and go about the business of suing someone. We can't sue any of these people because they didn't direct their opinion to us.
Now, are you speaking to the technical aspect of it, or are you speaking to the sovereignty aspect of it?
To every issue pertaining to us taking this back.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one, so I don't know.
Well, I just saw it 10 minutes ago.
That's certainly a prerogative.
Motion and a second. Do you have a second? Okay, now, please, Ms. Hammond.
I'm sorry. The first sentence of the letter is, as requested, I'm writing to summarize the law regarding potential liability of the Cherokee Nation and the nation's tribal council members with respect to the Cherokee Nation sanitary landfill. Certainly, it's your prerogative to ask Mr. Hembry to get you additional advice. I have no problem with that, but this was intended to try to address those issues from the nation's point of view.
Further discussion?
The point is, we didn't request it. So it's being given with information that's been given to this entity by somebody else. I think we need to request it, and the information that we want needs to come from our attorney, because he represents us.
Okay, Mr. Stokes?
Yeah, I think that what information reported to me, and maybe perhaps Mr. Carrington could answer, was just the amount of time that was spent and the cost of this additional request. Because I think that the information that they would find would be the same. I mean, we're referencing the same federal codes and the same environmental laws. So what was that expense would be my question for this particular background research.
I was going to say, have you all sent a bill on this one?
We haven't yet.
Are you directing your question to whom, Mr. Carrington?
Well,
I'm directing it to the council at large. Is to anybody take a guess at how much that might cost or where that funding's coming from? Can anybody answer that question in this room?
well, I guess would be my comment is that I'm a jack of all trades and maybe a master of none.
Right.
You know.
Parliamentary procedure. Honor council.
I will attest that I am not an environmental liability
Right.
expert, and I will need to get outside
If
help.
somebody has, they had a budget in which that they were going to seek legal counsel, and I'm just curious how much did they spend, whoever they is, for this legal advice. So if we're going to spend, $5,000, that's not a problem. If we're going to spend $60,000 to research something, then we may have an issue with that. So
I would estimate that it would be far less than $60,000, and probably around $5,000 would be my estimate. Did you hear that, Paul Ethel? But at any rate, it is hard. I do agree with Ms. Jordan that to get in a comfort zone, that you obtain an opinion that is definitely just for the tribal council and from your aspect of it. Although the reasoning and the law in here that I've read is very adequate, we need to make sure that I need to make sure that my clients are comfortable with that everything is out there. So I wouldn't necessarily be. That's not a bad idea in my opinion.
Did you have a comment?
I was just going to say in answer to part of that, Cherokee Nation Businesses has an ongoing contract with Hall Estill. The nation itself has an ongoing contract with Hall Estill. When I talked to Mr. Huffman about asking that the memo be revised to come from the governmental perspective, I specifically said on your dime, Bob, but I don't know how much that's going
right.
to.
I mean, typically I would think that there was an estimate or a not to exceed or something like that, or otherwise. I mean, I could sit here and go through cases all day long and say, well, this case and this case, and there's a lot of environmental related cases out there to review that you can associate some of this. So I was just kind of curious as what we spend on this particular opinion and what might our next expense be.
I don't think we know yet. what we do on those attorney fee contracts is put a limitation on them, particularly something like that, that's going to be a single issue or a one-time project. The contract with the
Right, usually
attorney
we
firm will
kind of
have a
define the
cap.
scope and whatever, and
Exactly.
it's pretty straightforward, so,
Exactly.
Is that all, Mr. Suggs?
yes, thank you.
Ms. Fisher-Todd?
I think Todd took care of it. Todd, you said your recommendation was to get our own for the council. And does it come out of your budget, or do we have money in it for that?
It would have to come out of the council budget, you know, be it my portion of it or some other
But
portion
there's
of
money
it.
there is what I'm asking you, and they are. Okay.
Mr. Stewart?
Yeah, Mike, would you contemplate that opinion would come from Paul Estel or another firm?
I would believe it would, they're contemplating coming from another firm. I mean, we have Paul Estel's
Okay.
opinion, and am I correct in that? Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna,
Okay.
I would suggest that we leave that to Todd, but I really think if you're gonna get assistance, a neutral, I mean, what I'm hearing is Hall Estel's on everybody's retainer. I would like to get someone independent,
Understood.
someone that's already getting money from everybody.
Hello. And Dave, were you finished?
Well, I was just going to say that if it is from Paul Estel, I think the cost has already been incurred, and for them to tailor that for your specific issues would not be there would not be significant cost to that. So there could be an adaptation of that memo specifically to the tribe, addressing those issues where not a lot of money in CMD would pay for that. If we get a new firm to start from scratch, then it would probably be additional cost.
And with respect to Mr. Stewart, therein lies the problem. You all are paying for it.
Right.
And the whole idea is to shift it from you all to us.
Right.
So I really think, and I don't mean this as any disrespect, but I think the money needs to come from us. I think the directive needs to come from us through our legal counsel to an independent source. I, however, am interested in, at some point, we make them change this on the front page to us so that we then have two sources that we can go back to.
Yeah. Any other comments? We have a motion on the floor. All in favor of Todd selecting and hiring an attorney to give us an opinion on this landfill? That's where you understand it, Todd?
Yes, ma'am.
All in favor, signify by saying, oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. So what exactly, is it a very narrow question we're asking, or is it just?
She said whatever is provided in the opinion there is, she would like the opinion, an independent opinion.
You know,
And
we don't want a review, we want
I
their
said
opinion.
opinion.
Yeah, that we want their opinion. And there may be some other issues that we need to have them enlighten us on.
I don't mean to lengthen this or be difficult, but I guess there's, a difference between is the landfill a good thing or a bad thing, or are we looking at the liability issues with respect to our body around the landfill or the government? I'd like to be more specific before, because otherwise I'm not going to support a broad question that.
I'm not talking about the landfill, I'm talking about these issues pertaining to this transfer.
Mr. Embry?
the legal opinion that I would want to seek is particularly the liability of my clients, the Cherokee Nation government officials, because that's who I represent. And also not whether you should or should not take control or have someone else take control of the landfill. That is a policy decision that you will be that you all will make. Legal opinions deal with legal issues, and that's what I would limit it to.
Yes.
And one specific thing that I would like addressed is that if we continue to hire the employees, and if we continue to hire the leadership, are we not piercing the corporate veil of that LLC?
Obviously, from reading the memorandums, the best way to maintain or to lessen liability from a controlling board from another board is independence and arm's length action between two bodies. And the term piercing the corporate veil obviously is one that is of great legal importance, and in order to have an opinion on, or to have information about piercing the corporate veil, you need to know what actions would you normally lend itself to piercing the corporate veil.
And that's a question that I find to be at the heart of this whole situation, is who's going to be in charge? Because if it does come back to us, then what my limited reading of what's been said here is that if we have anything to do with it, then we can be held to have pierced the corporate veil, and all kinds of liability can come back to us as officials. This legal opinion needs to go a step further and highlight to this body what piercing the corporate veil is. Because if we're truly going to set this up where liability is going to stay with CNWM, I think you're going to find from this next opinion we're going to have to make some big changes in the way that thing has been operated before. And that's why I would like this added opinion, and it's a little bit about what I talked to Todd about before this meeting. And so I think Todd is certainly going in the right direction. I would encourage you all to join in on this motion, take the time for us to get our own legal opinion that will explore just a little bit further than what we've gotten today.
Anyone else? Yeah, oh, I'm sorry, Sharon.
Thank you. I assume that our Attorney General is a representative of the government, the tribal government, would extend, especially since I think the chief is probably most at risk as the administrator of programs, to set up the structure, and then the Cherokee Nation Environmental Protection Commission, and it makes me wonder about lawyers too. If it depends on who's paying them, that their opinion might change. That is bothersome. So I don't.
That happens a lot.
Okay, I guess our attorney will agree, which makes me question our attorney too. I don't see at this time there hasn't been enough reason given to me why we would continue to spend a considerable amount more of Cherokee money to address the same question that seems to already been answered, because there's been an extensive amount of paperwork we've had to review just in the last couple of weeks. And I think it behooves this body to just stay out of it to some degree. I think that's what that speaks to, just as a general comment. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Anybody else? Okay, all in favor of Todd hiring an additional legal assistance, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Roll call. Yes, you support his hiring additional attorneys. I mean, legal opinion.
Chris Soap,
No.
Kara Callan Watts,
No.
Bill England,
No.
Bill John Baker,
Yes.
Jack Baker,
No.
Harley's absent, Julia Coates,
No.
Bradley Cobb,
No.
Joe Crittenden,
Yes.
Jody Fishinghawk,
Yes.
Meredith Fraley,
Yes.
Janelle Fulbright,
Yes.
Don Garvin,
No.
Chuck Hoskin Jr., Tina Gloria Jordan,
Yes.
Curtis Snell.
Yes.
7-7.
7-7, motion fails. Okay, Mr. Stewart, were you going to do the presentation?
Yes. Okay, what I will attempt to cover is the kind of business side of this and not the legal side, since I'm not a lawyer. So I'm going to stay out of that gunfight, if you don't mind. But that was one of the reasons that, in conclusion of all the opinions, that we recommended that it come back as a result of the liability that was created to the C&B Board of Directors and the business units. So I can say that after we looked at it all, it was kind of the lawyer's conclusion and our board's conclusion that It was an unnecessary burden, and the liability was already there, so it was unnecessary to burden the business units with that liability. So that's how all this happened. So what I will cover is what we did from a business standpoint with the landfill to get it completed and built, and the business analysis, and then the final analysis that we concluded should be done in order to address some of these issues that you're talking about, such as piercing the corporate veil and those things. So I'm just going to go through the presentations and the discussions that we had with our board, and we've adapted those a little bit for today. So I would say, and Sean is here. Sean, as I told you before, when I took over at C&B, I kind of put him in charge of the landfill, just because we needed somebody that understood all of the issues. So he's here to address some of those construction issues, and if I misstate something, Sean, unless you want to get up and he always says you're doing just fine, you just keep right on going. Okay, landfill is currently in compliance with Cherokee Nation EPC regulations. Is that a fair statement? All right. They approved the line of repair and have been involved in the construction all along the way, and we've taken their advice and recommendations and made adjustments in some cases to add work or so on to make sure that we kind of went above and beyond the construction side of things. So Sean, you're together with that as well. So that construction is completed.
There is one issue that still has to be repaired. That's the
John, would you mind coming forward? We can't hear you.
You're going to get up here wherever we go.
Yeah.
The only issue that I'm aware of with the EPC that's still outstanding is the methane gas. There's a plan for that, and it's just a matter of moving forward with it now that the new cell is constructed and ready to go.
And that's kind of an ongoing issue with landfills, is the methane. So there is a plan there, but it is something that's kind of hot on the radar. If there's anything that's hot, that is the one thing that we're paying attention to. The leachate system and some of those things, we redesigned it so that that's better than it was. So I would say that we've really focused on to make sure that it was built right and it's ready to go. So I think you can feel comfortable that with those issues considered, the landfill is in much better shape, than it was. The legal considerations, well, let me cover the financial side of things. We looked at the financial side, and there are a couple of things that determine how fast you fill up the landfill. Is number one, the amount of trash and how much you compact it. So the more you compact it, the more you can get in the landfill. So we looked at it under two different scenarios. One is basically just fundamentally it's paid for with about $10 or $11 million. So now you have a landfill that's ready to put trash in. Now you can put that trash in there two ways. The way I recommended was that we put it in a way that was conducive to closure. So by the time that you put 4 years, it's about 4 years worth of trash based on the volume. If you accelerate it, you can do it in 3 years. You can just put more trash and compact it more, and you can accelerate it. But under this market, it would be about a 4-year span. So you could put that trash level, and you could contemplate building another cell and build it level, and then you'd have all these cells, and there would be one big closure plan for all the cells. Or you could build the cell and put the trash in it in a way that would be conducive to close that one cell. So in other words, you have to put the trash in so it's domed. This kind of elementary. You put the trash in and you compact it and put it in the landfill in a way that within the time of 3 or 4 years, you are working the whole time to close it. So the people that are there, they're spending their time, they have spare time to work, and when they work, they're working on getting it in a certain way by that end of year 4. Okay, so that's one way. The second way is just put the trash in, and you're going to start building another site, and you spend another $5 or $6 million, and you build it, and then you get ready to close that one, and then you just keep going. In terms of the legal consideration, so we went through that business model, and
if we get rid of the Fayetteville contract, that improves the financials of it considerably. Okay, so this puts it on a good financial ground. It's all paid for. There's some equipment that needs to be bought, but basically you're paying for the operating expenses, and all the money that's generated would go into a fund to close. All right, if you're not going to pay back the $11 million, and you just consider the $11 million in, and you spend it to get it up to a certain point, then every dollar beyond that point would go to closure. So it's about a 3 to 4 year pay. I'm just talking about approximately. So you're going to have $7 to $8 million. Is that kind of where the numbers fall after 3 or 4 years? You're going to have approximately. You're going to have $7 or $8 million, depending upon how much trash you put in there, to close it. Which we had some estimates done by outside consultants, and that's close to what it would take if you build it all the 4 years and use all the employees' time and the equipment and all of that to get it ready for closure. Then that $7 or $8 million would get you closed, plus the fund. You're going to have about $3 million by that time, or $4, in the closure fund. So 7 or 8 plus the 3 or 4 would get you to a point where you could close. Now, there would be some ongoing monitoring costs and costs in the future, but those would be minimal. So is that I want to get anybody that doesn't agree with that to raise their hand. Is that fair? Okay, so nobody's saying anything. So
Can I interrupt just
Yes.
a moment, Dr. Tom?
Is that 7 minus the 3 or 4? Or are you saying?
no, plus the 3 or 4.
What, it is definitely.
There is an existing fund of about $2 million. Is that okay? When I get everybody going, yeah, that means
I
yeah.
just want to make sure
Yeah.
it is plus the 3
Plus
or 4.
the So you're going to have about $10 million, say, approximately, to close this fund, close this site.
Okay. Thanks.
Or you use the 10
Oh, Ms.
and you
Calhoun.
build another site. That's your option.
I'm unsure, because I had a question about the documents that we received and stuff, and a contract that was mentioned in there. So I don't know if it's appropriate in an open forum to ask that, because I would think it would be confidential, so, but I think the body needs to know the answer to the question, so any suggestions on?
You might ask it, and then we can address it if I feel like it's.
Is it in regard to the issue he's speaking to right now?
It's the business decision about the Arkansas contract and whether or not we have to conclude with it.
I think that would be.
The way I understand it, it's in there. The way I read it in those books is we're fully accepting that contract, and that's not the way I understood it. We have no obligation because we saw the waiver of sovereign immunity. This body didn't acknowledge that contract.
I would suggest that if we discuss that, it's an executive session because it's a legal matter.
You want you at this point, Ms. Counter, or do you feel?
I don't know if the body's
Mr.
done.
Henry?
That wouldn't be a matter that we could go into executive session on. So therefore, if there's any private questions about that, I would suggest,
Three.
talking at recess. So.
Ms. Calhoun, are you finished? Ms. Fishinghall?
Oh, I was just going to ask, why are we concerned about honoring or not honoring the Fayetteville contract now? I mean, we addressed that a year and a half ago. And this body agreed that we were supposed to honor it, or part of y'all did, the majority did. We
Mr.
didn't.
Henry?
I was just talking with Secretary Knight, and we've made our intentions known to the city of Fayetteville, so she does not believe that it would be a matter that would be confidential, and therefore to talk about it.
Well, that'd be good, because I'd kind of like to know why admin suddenly said we can get rid of the contract, when before they said we would not. I'm kind of curious.
Melanie, did you want to address that?
I can, Madam Speaker.
Thank you.
As I explained to a smaller group of you when we met about this issue in Catoosa, the AG and I made a visit to the city of Fayetteville, visited with the chief of staff for the mayor's office, as well as the people that operate their landfill solid waste disposal operations. Very cordial, but We were very clear that, in looking at the continuation of the viability of the landfill financially, that we've known for some time, we've been at a disadvantage with this contract. We have maintained the contract, as you all know, for this period of time in the interest of being a good business partner. They believed they had a deal, regardless of whether we had waived sovereign immunity, whether we had followed appropriate procedures in having a contract signed and signed by the appropriate official or not. They believe they have a deal. We explained to them the faults with that contract, the fact that we had not waived sovereign immunity, and the fact that for ongoing viability of landfill to continue in the same manner is not a viable option for us. And so we explained to them that something will have to change. That something, in our opinion, the best thing would be to renegotiate the rates with them over that agreement. And I think they completely understood that the rates that they were paying were very good for them and not necessarily good for us. And so I think that they did understand, and the AG can pipe in on this. She attended the meeting, as I said. They understood where we were coming from. I felt that there was a willingness to negotiate, and in fact, since that meeting, our staff has been told by their staff that they have intentions of opening that contract up for bid, which I believe is a positive move. It allows us to bid on it, and if they don't like our rates, then they can choose to contract with another operation.
Okay, I feel like my question was answered. These are the same points that we brought up to you all before, but now you all have done a 180. So I want to know why you all didn't ask Fayetteville this before. I'm not being hard to go with. I'm just telling you again and answering.
I think a decision is always made based on the circumstances at the time, and the circumstances at the time that we made this decision before were different. We had the landfill closing. We didn't have an open landfill. It was not necessarily expected that we would close the landfill in the middle of this contract, and we wanted to maintain that business relationship because we knew we were going to have a good reputation for business and have those good business relationships when we reopened. And in order to make sure that we didn't jeopardize our ability to get contracts when we reopened, I mean, that was just a decision at the time, and you reevaluate decisions all of the time to make sure that you're still on a good course. That's all I can say about that.
One more thing, if I could add, is that there is a provision in that contract, I believe it's in September, that it's up for renegotiation. So there is some language in the contract that opens it up as the closer we get to September.
Provides more
leverage. And so if you're a year out, it's a little more difficult. Now that we're close and we're ready to make some business decisions, I think we decided from a business standpoint, and we needed the nation's help with that, we got it done. So that was the key, I think, in my mind, that triggered the discussion.
And in terms of the documents you were provided, I just wanted to clarify that when we do the financials, and Callie can explain how she viewed it in the financials, but when you do those things, you try to assume the most conservative view. And so not knowing at what point we might renegotiate rates, or at what point they might rebid, we try to assume the most conservative view in the financials to make sure that we're not overestimating our ability to do that.
Yes, what was the contract at Fayetteville, the tipping fee? What was it again?
Kelly, can you go?
The Fayetteville contract is $24.49.
$24.49.
Right.
And she said it was really a sweetheart of a deal.
Who said it was a sweetheart?
No.
Oh, well.
I didn't use those words.
Well, it wasn't sweetheart, but I'm kind of reading into it, I guess.
Not from our perspective.
Not from our perspective. It was a good deal
Yeah, but
for
it was a very
Fayetteville.
good deal for Fayetteville,
Right.
$24.49.
Right, because, and the reason that was a good deal is that includes the transportation costs. The contract that was entered into, that was the tipping fee plus the transporting of the trash from the transfer station in Fayetteville to our landfill.
What's your estimates that you witnessed today?
Okay.
I know David witnessed some, and then I know you witnessed some too. What's
Yeah.
both of them? I'm kind of curious what the difference is.
Just a second, I have.
While David's looking for his, I'll
Yeah,
explain.
okay, 18, yeah. It was about 1850.
Is yours?
Originally, the hauling estimates were looking around 9 to 10 with all the hauling costs and all, the price of gas is going up. It's about, $15 to $18. So we're only making $8 or $9 a ton. So it didn't make sense really based on that for us to continue when we can take $20 a ton or whatever and then not have to pay the tipping or the hauling charge.
And then what did you go with?
In this paper, which is in your packet, I took C&B's model, and this does not assume any Fayetteville trash. And I looked at all of the costs, the development costs, the equipment costs, closure at $2 a ton. And what I attempted to do was put together a tonnage and an average tipping fee where the landfill could come close to breaking even, and a small loss over the 5-year period. My rationale for doing that was, yes, we could fill the landfill up at $18.50 a ton, but we would lose more money. We could get more volume if we lowered the tipping fee, but if we can get an average of somewhere around $22, we can come close to breaking even on this and not losing. I think my 4-year projection, which was higher volume, we would have lost a little over $1 million over the 4 years. And in this scenario, it's a loss of $150,000 over a 5-year period. That's all the costs, not operating profit.
Let me just get this straight. Fayetteville's was $24.49, C&B's was $18.50, and you're going with $22.
That was just an estimate that I came up with to...
Did you all take in all the considerations Callie did with the, she said she went with the tipping, the cost, the machine was depreciated. Did you all take that in?
Yeah, we did that same thing. And what we did is we took all the contracts and we averaged them because you get different fees from different entities. And so you come up with what you believe from a business standpoint is going to be your average revenue per ton. And so it depends on what you believe the market's going to do. And so we ran 2 or 3 different cases. I think our mid case, we ran one just like Callie did. We looked at downside and we looked at upside. So but you got to land somewhere. You got to say, we believe it's going to be this. Now, the business side of this was you could take more at cheaper and get it done in 3 years and not have the operating costs for the 4th year. So that's another business strategy that would have to be determined.
Right.
So she really the same strategy you did. When she done it, she went a little different.
It really depends on what you want to do or what your goal is for the landfill. And again, the difference between what David assumed and what my model assumed and the Fayetteville rate at $24.49, that includes a cost of almost $10 a ton, I think, for hauling.
And therein lies the difference between our business people running a business and the government running a business. Okay.
Finish with this one? Yes, Mr. Salt, and then Mr.
I was just going to add that I think that the business case had changed quite a bit. I know from, maybe Dave can talk a little bit about it, but initially when it was presented to the board, there were some different calculations that were being used that maybe made it more favorable. I think that the operations was supposed to be online by now.
October,
So we're, I don't know how many months behind, but that's all lost revenue. So I think it's fair to say with those types of analysis that you would be subject to, making a different plan or responding to the circumstances you're in now. And, I just think that's a good, wise move, so.
And you also have competition and who's going to, charging what. Competition is going very aggressively and trying to lock up contracts, and so we might have to be more aggressive and go out and lock those up at cheaper rates. So it's a business. I mean, you all know how that is. You got to move and shake and do what you need to do at the time. So, but I think, if you look at any of those scenarios, you're still where I said. I mean, any of those don't get you off that 4-lane highway of saying you're going to have about 7 or 8 million, and you're going to have about 3 or 4 in the fund. Even if you go with the worst business case, or the best business case, you're still going to be in that kind of decision-making process. So I don't think it changes, the long-term business strategy. It might change your short-term to try to make as much money as you can. But long-term, I think you got to decide what you want to be when you grow up. I mean, you be operating landfills, or you want to work for some closure method.
Ms. Calhoun?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to clarify for my own mind, and I think this will be a returning question. So if the government tries to run the business, kind of like these questions we're asking maybe today, that's piercing corporate veil, right?
You don't want to run the business.
So I'm asking
I'll tell you
for
what,
context.
If you'll let me, give me about 10 minutes, and I'll go through some of the recommendations that we had, and I think it will answer your very question. Okay? So let me get through that, and if you could.
Thank you.
And then we'll jump onto that issue, because it's a very important one. It's really at the core of how we recommended to go forward, even if it was not operated by the nation. If C&B operated it would have the same issues that we need to cover. So I'll go through those, and then you can keep in mind that this is what we concluded, and we have a lot of lawyers here that have input on this, but fundamentally this is where we landed.
Mrs. Stewart, hold on just one
Okay.
minute.
I would like to defer my question and let him get through his 10 minutes.
Okay, so we recommended, after all of this, out of all of this, that we would do a couple of things. First of all, we would make sure that there were adequate operational policies and procedures in place. And so what we did is we mobilized the C&B resources. We had internal audit, we had accounting, we had IT, we had security. So I just got everybody in the room and said, let's go out there and get the operating procedures in place, get the employees certified. We had, to run the software, and we bought the software, and so it's all ready to go. We had ethics training. We went out and said, we want you to tell us if you know of any mishaps or anything that we should know about, and we want you to tell us when you find out about them. And so everybody signed that. I told them, I said, I want to have a meeting. Basically, everybody in that works there, they acknowledge that we want to know anything that went on. And so they were there. We held those types of training sessions. So we have the operating policies and procedures in place. We have the advice of internal audit, cash handling procedures, and some signature authority in place. And we hired a consultant to review all those and opine as to their validity and whether or not they covered all the issues. So that's been done. The several things that we recommended to cover the issue you talked about, Kara, are we hire a waste management CEO. We would establish signature authority for that CEO to operate the business under certain authority limits. We would have Waste Management perform all of its own financial analysis for operation decision and rates offered to customers. They would be responsible for all operational decisions and reporting to the EPC with oversight by the Cherokee Nation in accordance with signature authority. New assets and contracts should be entirely owned by Cherokee Nation Waste Management rather than any of its affiliates or affiliates. And this has currently been done. We've prepared contracts in Waste Management's name for the landfill. We've transferred the EPC permit to Cherokee Nation Waste Management. And all of the property, the tractors, and the landfill equipment have been placed in Waste Management's name. Have we already modified the operating agreement for the CEO's role yet? Has that been done? Okay, so this is one item that still has to be done, but we'd modify the LLC's operating agreement to further specify the CEO's role, so that it would be very clear that that entity had a leader that had to make operational decisions. We would create a shared service agreement between Cherokee Nation and Waste Management, or C&B, that would formally establish the services that must be provided. And we would provide in that agreement, and it's been drafted, right? And it would provide that C&B, if they sent invoices or wrote checks, that they would not be involved in the operational decisions, nor would the owner or the Cherokee Nation. Those would be made at that level, and that service agreement has been prepared. And then we would require annual environmental audits of the landfill and the information specified is restricted or confidential. And I would add one thing to that, that we could also provide for operational audits that would go in quarterly, and we could design a work program, and that would not say that someone else would be making the decisions, but it would be an audit, and it would be a way for the council to say, are things going right or wrong? We wouldn't make decisions, we would just perform audits, and that's independent. So that's an option. So that's where I think in a nutshell, where we concluded, and then the legal issues came up, and then the issue with regard to transferring it to the nation came up. But I think the landfill itself is in position. We've done all the research, and from a policy and procedure standpoint, it's prepared to where it would not pierce the corporate veil. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not giving advice, but I'm just saying, of all the facts and circumstances, this is where we landed.
Any discussion? Yes, Ms. Jordan?
What I'm hearing is you want to give the landfill back to the nation. Is that correct?
The board of directors felt like, on research and then in discussion with the chief, that from a legal standpoint, it was better for the tribe as a whole to eliminate the liability from its business units and to its board of directors, since the liability already exists with the nation.
If you give CNWM back to the tribe, who will be running CNWM? If we took it today, who would have it? Who would be running it tomorrow?
I have just the young lady that can answer that.
Board of directors would be running it, and we would have a board seated.
And do we have that board in place?
The chief is prepared to make some nominations to that board, and in fact, nominations are due to be submitted today for the Rules Committee. And I can share with you who those people are.
Have these people agreed to sit on the board?
Two of them have indeed indicated their willingness to do that, and a third, and I'll just go through them. First of all, one is Blake Fletcher from Stillwell. He has retired from Greenleaf and is familiar with environmental concerns there, as well as business background. Rick Dartery from Stillwell has indicated a willingness to serve. And then the third that the chief has not yet inquired with is Frank Farrell, but chief has plans to call him today to see if he is willing to serve.
Would it not be more prudent for CNB to get a board in place, a board of directors, over CNWM before we seriously talk about taking this back? Should that board not be in place so that our hands, it doesn't look like we're already from the word go trying to pierce the corporate veil?
Well, that is precisely, Madam Speaker, why the board, it's important to seat the board.
And the board's not seated today?
The board is not seated today. The board would be nominated today, and
it can't be nominated today because it's not on the agenda.
A nomination would come forward for the Rules Committee at the end of the month today.
So it would have, if they were confirmed at that time, they would have to go before the council, which is not until sometime in September.
That's right, and a permit modification to the EPC can't be considered until August the 25th.
So
that's the next time that the EPC
So is
meets.
some of this not premature?
What did you say?
The EPC must consider a permit change in order to effectuate the transaction. If I could sort of go through, the structure, because I think that's a recurring question here, is how...
One moment, she still has a question in regard to that issue. Ms. Gloria Jordan?
Well, I think we're going to have to talk about the budget. We're going to have to talk about the board. We're going to have to talk about, is the board going to be given all the rights and privileges to do all the hiring? We don't know where all of the money's going to come from to operate this business that we've always been told by you all, you, meaning admin, that we're not to be involved in businesses. Yet now, we're being told, but we want you to take this business back. This is completely contrary to what for 2 years, since I've been on this council, you all have preached to us, that businesses are to be run by C&B. We're in the government business. They're in the business. And now you're telling us, no, we want you to take this business. Well, folks, I don't want the business. If we're actually going to do CNWM is going to run this, then CNWM needs to be completely set up with a governing board before we even talk about going any further with this. And I see it's 12 o'clock. I think that we need to do a motion.
Ms. Knight?
If I may answer the question, I think it would address many of the issues that are being brought forward. First of all, let's talk about the structure, because when we sent the landfill to C&B, there was no corporation called CN Waste Management. It was an organization under the nation, as a department of the nation, essentially, and run directly by the nation in your budget. The day-to-day operations were carried out by our staff. Now there is a corporation called CN Waste Management, and it is wholly owned by C&B at this point in time. The proposal is that the owner would instead become the nation, but the corporate entity called CN Waste Management remains a corporate entity. So you bring that over, wholly owned by the nation. It doesn't become a department of the nation as it was when it went over, directly operated by us, but it's a corporate entity wholly owned by us. Has its own board of directors. That board of directors is charged with doing all of the business of that corporate entity. It will operate the landfill, it will hire and fire, it will ensure compliance and report to the EPC, get any permits that they need to operate and so forth, do the dealings of the operation. None of those decisions would come from our staff at the nation. And the board would be charged with making those decisions. The way, to make a comparison, the way that we operate home health, for instance, is very similar to the way that this would operate. It's a board, it rolls up to our financials at the end of the day, but we have a hands-off approach to its operation. In fact, we don't make any of the decisions related to home health. So the leadership, we talked a little bit about that. We wanted some local people. The chief was interested in getting some people from the area that would be knowledgeable and interested and have a vested interest in the operation. We have drafted a lot of the transfer documents and prepared for the transfer because someone needs to do that, although we plan to take a hands-off approach once the board is seated. So those transfer documents, you have drafts in front of you. A permit amendment has been drafted. My understanding the next EPC meeting has been deferred to the 25th of August, so we would ask for that to be placed on their agenda for consideration. Essentially, the permit change will not change the owner of the permit. It will still be CN Waste Management, but the ownership of CN Waste Management has to be delineated as to the Cherokee Nation as opposed to CNB. As David's talked about, there's a host of policy and procedure that has been drafted by CNB to be put in place, and the board would have to consider those and whether to approve those, implement those, or make changes to those and then approve them. Financial projections, we've talked a little bit about those. I think Callie's prepared to, talk further about her assumptions in doing that. Those, as we have been indicating all along, are preliminary in that the board will have to make its own review of those financials, of any contracts that are being proposed, what rates need to be charged, and make those decisions. But we had to make some assessment as to where we are financially before this transaction takes place. In terms of capitalization, and again, Callie can answer detailed questions, but the existing capital that's been put in the business by CNB would remain there. So whatever's left of the construction fund that remains after everything's finished up would become the property of CN Waste Management, continue to be the property of CN Waste Management. CNB board has also agreed to infuse an additional $1.5 million of cash into the business before the transfer to ensure that there is cash flow during the startup of operations and as contracts are being gained to get the business viable. And all of those assumptions Callie has worked into the financials. We wanted the additional capitalization for a couple of reasons, and we've all talked about closure account at length. We wanted to ensure that the operation of the new cell over the next 4 to 5 years would allow to build reserves for a closure account. So we needed the cash on hand to be able to ensure that that happened. The other thing is if the business will be an ongoing concern, if the board decides to continue to operate this business beyond this cell, then there needs to be a reserve for building a new cell at the conclusion of this one. And so that also assumes that there's a reserve of some sort to build a new cell if the decision is not to close at the end of 4 to 5 years, but to build a new cell and continue to operate. And then the administrative services agreement, because we know that this new corporation does not have, it's relied on CNB for all of its administrative services like payroll, accounting, and so forth, benefits management, for instance. So that administrative services agreement essentially will pay CNB a fee to be the processor of all of those administrative services, the benefits, the payroll, and the accounting, so among some other things. But we can get into the details of that, and I think you have a copy of that draft as well in your packet. So I hope that clarifies a bit the structure that our staff do not intend to make management decisions on behalf of the landfill after this transaction is completed.
We get Ms. Fishing Hawk and then Ms. Callum Watt. I guess we're just going to be directed to her, Ms. Fishing Hawk.
I'll defer for a minute. No.
You don't have anything, Ms. Callum Watt?
I just want to say thank you to everybody, because I know that this took a tremendous amount of work, and this situation, since I've been on council, has never been easy for whoever has been responsible for the entire landfill or any part of the operation. I think we've had the landfill for 25 years, if I remember right, way before I was ever in a decision-making role at the tribe. And I don't think that the circumstances, maybe the public that's watching has a different view of what's going on. So I think the decision is that we either continue to operate the landfill, and this is not necessarily my decision or even necessarily this body's, but we either, as a tribe, we own the landfill, we have for 25 years. It is either operated as a business or it's operated as a government infrastructure. This body has expressed that it needs to only be operated as government infrastructure because we can't take outside, they don't want to take out-of-state trash, they don't want to take anything broader than 4 or 5 counties maybe, which tells me that CMB should no longer run it. Not just the liability issues, but the business perspective. It has then become government infrastructure, which means we have to find a suitable means in 2009, the year 2009, to operate it as a government infrastructure per EPA federal guidelines. So I know that the documents on all the procedures that we've received and all the other stuff has taken a tremendous amount of effort, and all the testing and the money that's been consumed to make sure and verify that this facility is being ran properly, not just as a business, but also from an environmental standpoint to protect those people near and downstream from the landfill. So I just want to acknowledge that, because I don't know that that's been acknowledged today in this meeting, and that it's on the record for the public to understand that. And I personally will tell you, even though that landfill does not physically affect me being in Rogers County, I'm not downstream of it, I'm not near it, I don't believe that the tribe should be in the business of landfills, and I'm excited to see that we are heading to closure of the landfills, what I'm hearing. But it has to be done properly too, both from a fiscal and environmental perspective, a technical means. So this is painful for everyone. Don't think that, I at least do not appreciate all that work that's being done. But we're liable regardless because we're owners of the landfill from an environmental perspective. I think it's now how we structure it, and I'm excited not to be part of the day-to-day business operations of the landfill. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I think Dave addressed part of that, Kara, because they have developed policies and procedures to ensure that those environmental potentials are addressed, correct?
Yes.
That essentially, go ahead. I mean, I don't really want to continue. I guess just from an agenda today, the business side of that, I think we've covered. The organizational piece, I think there's still concern out there, about liability that you absorb as a result of this, and that's probably the next thing that has to be. I think we've done everything we can do from a business standpoint and from an organizational standpoint to get it prepared to operate. Who owns it is kind of, I think, on the table. So that would conclude my presentation. If there's any other discussion, I'd be happy to answer questions. I think most of these are going to be for lawyers.
Yes, Madam Chairman, I move that we recess till August 27th at 10 a.m.
A motion to recess until August, and that's the day of rules and executive and finance the morning of. Do I have a second? Do I have a second?
Second, we put August 27th at 10 a.m. Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Mr. Soap?
Yeah, I have a few more questions, but we can vote on it.
Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
No.
We'll recess until August 27, 10 a.m. Okay, any announcements? Okay, we're recessed.